I was about 3 years old at the time. My brother was 5. Our parents were going through a divorce, so my grandparents offered to look after me and my brother until the divorce was final so that we weren't caught up in the mess. My grandparents' anniversary was coming up, so my grandmother thought it'd help our mother take her mind off things to spend some time with us so she could relax. She and my grandfather went out for the evening and left me and my brother home with our mother for the night. Things seemed to be going good at first, nothing out of the ordinary. It was starting to get a bit late and my brother and I were sitting on the living room floor watching television. After a while, she asked if we had heard anything, and I remember we both looked at her and she had this worried look on her face. She muted the television for a moment to listen, and we started hearing noises coming from our basement. It was the sound of our bathroom door in our basement swinging open and closed again. It sounded like someone had just walked into the bathroom and slammed the door. But that couldn't be possible, seeing as how me, my older brother, and our mom were the only ones in the house at the time. Mom dismissed it at first, reasoning that the house was just old and old houses usually make strange noises. So we went back to watching television again for a while. After about an hour or so had passed, it was around 8 o'clock. Almost time for my brother and I to go to bed. Mom muted the television again and told us to be quiet. We listened for a minute and didn't hear anything at first. Then after a while, we began to hear the sound of pounding coming from the basement just under the living room floor. It was soft at first, but as it went on, it got louder and louder. The sound encircled the living room almost like a shark circling in on its prey. It got closer to where my brother and I were sitting as it circled around us, growing louder and louder until it finally sounded like someone was banging on the living room floor under us with their fists, trying to break through the floorboards. Me and my brother jumped up onto the couch and huddled ourselves close around our mom, who was curled up on the couch and was just as scared as we were. The sounds of the pounding slowly subsided. Mom frantically dialed the restaurant where my grandfather said he and our grandmother would be. After a while, my grandfather picked up and asked what was wrong. Mom told him what we were hearing. My grandfather is still a firm skeptic. He doesn't believe in ghosts. He told her it was probably just the pipes rattling and that she was just under a lot of stress from the divorce and her imagination was running away from her. He then told her to be sure to have us in bed by 9 o'clock and he would see us in the morning, and he hung up. A few minutes went by and we were still huddled together on the couch. Mom did her best to stay calm and hold herself together for me and my brother, saying that Granddad was probably just right. It was an old house after all. So we just went back to watching television, trying to take our minds off of the situation before we had to go to bed. I'm not exactly sure what happened next, but a strong feeling of fear came over my mom as she turned off the television. I could see it in her eyes as my brother and I both looked back at her. We sat there in silence for only a moment. The air was dead quiet. Then the banging started up again, louder than ever. It sounded like someone was frantically trying to break through the floor in a fit of rage. Mom picked up the phone and dialed the restaurant again, but the phone wasn't working. She picked us up both from the floor and pushed us into the main hall and ran to the kitchen to get us our coats from the chair at the end of the table next to the basement door. Suddenly, me and my brother both heard what sounded like a set of heavy combat boots stomping up from the basement stairs and a hair-raising slam against the basement door. It sounded like whoever or whatever was down there wanted to get out. We then heard a tumbling noise as if someone had thrown a chair down the basement stairs. Mom didn't waste a second in getting us the hell out of the front door. She practically threw us outside and we spent the rest of the evening in her car until our grandparents returned home. Our grandmother's car finally pulled into the lot at the top of our street and my grandfather saw that we were sitting in our mom's car and he got angry. He demanded to know why we weren't in bed before they returned home. Mom told them everything. You could just tell by the way she spoke that she was shaken. My brother and I confirmed everything she said, but our grandfather had none of it. He went up to the locked room on the second floor and grabbed a pistol from the gun cabinet and demanded my mom follow him to the basement so that he could show her that there was absolutely no one else in the house. But she refused to follow him into the basement. Of course, after checking everything over, nothing was found to be broken, so there couldn't have been anyone else in the house. Our grandmother didn't need convincing. She had always believed in ghosts. She had stories of her own encounters with the paranormal. But either way, Mom never spent another night in her grandparents' house alone after that. To this day, she refuses to stay after dark. My brother is 30 now and I'm 28. Our grandmother has since passed away and our grandfather's health hasn't been what it should be. So I stay with him and I look after him. To this day, I don't know who or what was in our basement that night. I hope I never find out. But every time my grandfather asks me to go down in the basement to get something for him, I always get the feeling that there's someone watching me down there. And every time I go down there, the bathroom door on the far side of the basement is always open, no matter how many times I close it. Every time I go down there, that goddamn door is always open. A little update on this story. I've looked into the history of my grandfather's house where this event took place. As it turns out, several of the previous owners had died on the property. One person had a heart attack and died in his sleep in one of the bedrooms on the second floor. A second person had died of a blood clot in her brain in our living room. And the third, being the original owner of the house when it was first built in 1911, had fallen down the basement stairs and broke his neck against the wall of the foundation. Could this have been him in our basement? I was around maybe 16 or 15 and my mom and I were visiting this friend whose name I can't remember, but for this story I'll call him Bill. Bill lived out in this real old log cabin at the very edge of these old woods. It was around 11 o'clock at night. I was dead tired and my mom was driving through the woods. She had an extra gas tank in the back part of the car because it was a really long trip. I fell asleep and woke up to this loud crash when my mom was putting gas into the car. It freaked me out. My mom told me to stay in the car because it sounded like a loud gunshot crossed with a lion roar that came from a real pissed off person. She finished filling up the car and grabbed the flashlight thinking it was someone stalking us because this was the middle of the woods and who knows what else could pop up. I heard a noise I couldn't even describe afterwards and my mom never heard it. She came back around 5 minutes later and she was clearly freaked out, but even to this day she won't tell me, but I know what it is. The paranormal is quite normal for our family. We're used to weird stuff, but those woods. Imagine lost woods from Ocarina of Time crossed with Suicide Forest with a dirt road. At that point, I'm too tired to even ask what freaked her out, so I go back to sleep. I wake up around maybe 4 in the morning and we made it to the cabin. Bill is this guy that can best be described as a man-bear standing 6'4" and built like a wall. The most friendly guy you will ever meet. A gazebo was in the front yard, made out of pure walnut that he handcrafted, and beyond that were more woods, and beautiful sight where the lake just reflects off everything. We chat it up and have a fun time. He makes us this stew that is to die for. We're all relaxing by the gazebo around 11 at night. Normally I'd have gone to bed, but this was summer vacation so I was allowed to stay up. I start seeing these things, which I can only describe as red brooding eyes, and they were in the woods. But it was still too far to be certain. Bill ran inside to get his gun, and we follow him into the woods. The eyes disappear and it got freezing cold, like walk-in freezer cold. The flashlight goes out and I got sandwiched between Mom and Bill, and what happened afterwards still scares me. We all hear, "Where are my babies?" and this loud shrieking scream, and I can see this long black-haired woman who had no eyes and was just torn in a white blood-stained robe, just running like a linebacker right at us. At this point, I literally wet myself screaming. Bill fires his shotgun. I'm bawling my eyes out and my mom is hugging me like a small child. It starts to warm up after that and we all went back to the cabin. We were all hysterical. Bill locks the door tightly and was shaking so hard that he could barely hold his gun. We didn't sleep for the rest of the night after that. To first start off, I lived in a medium-sized house and shared a room with my brother. The room had a window on the right side looking into my backyard. The room was ground level. It was the last week we were living in the house after about 8 or 9 years living there. During the beginning few days of the week, strange things started happening like tapping, creaking, etc. Me and my brother weren't really fazed by it as the house was pretty old. About 4 days into the week, I woke up in the middle of the night with my TV on to static. I turned my TV off and went back to bed when suddenly I was woken up when I heard something outside. I saw a dark figure walk past my window. Me being a kid, as this was quite a while ago, I was frozen in fear and didn't move a muscle. After about 15 minutes of petrifying fear, I realized my brother was awake too. and him and I ran to my parents' room. They told us it was nothing and to go back to bed, so we did. The next day at about the same time, I woke up to the sound of water running in my bathroom. I got scared shitless but had to stand up and turn the water off. As I got to my bathroom and turned the faucet off, I saw the same figure I had seen the previous night staring at me through the small window. I remember its piercing eyes to this day. It was dark, so I couldn't really see its body clearly, but it looked almost human besides the fact its eyes were a glowing white color that felt like it was piercing into my soul. I bolted out of the bathroom, woke my brother up, and gunned it upstairs to my parents' room. My dad was pissed that we woke him up again, so he decided to check out what was outside himself. He was horrified at what he saw on the camera. The cameras caught a glimpse of a black figure walk into frame right before all the cameras went static. My dad didn't want to call the police as they would have thought he was insane trying to explain there was a monster stalking his kids. The next morning I asked my brother if he woke up and anything happened to him in the nights prior to what happened, and he said he had woken up but not seen anyone or anything. The next couple of nights were eventless, but we kept alert to make sure nothing happened in the night. It was the final night before we moved out. I was woken up yet again, but at the exact same time as my brother. It was as if we were in sync. The creature was directly outside of our window staring at us with its white eyes. My brother screamed as loud as he could and our dad ran out with a gun and shot the figure. Right before he shot, the figure punched the window, leaving a shattered fist mark in the window glass. The figure ran around the corner of the house, leaving no blood trail and no evidence besides the broken window. My parents called the police and explained what happened. The police officer said there had been multiple calls with the same figure around the area. We moved out the next morning after trashing the broken window. We left the city never seeing the house or the creature again. Maybe it was something or someone that didn't want us to leave. But all I know is that I would never go back to that house again. I've always been into paranormal stuff, ghosts and whatnot. What happened to me took place on the week of Halloween in 2014. I remember being on a group call where we were discussing paranormal and creepy stuff, and this guy brought the Ouija board into the topic. Somehow someone dared me to set up a Ouija board and do it live with them. At first I wasn't really willing to do so because I'm easily spooked and I was all alone at home. Peer pressure kinda took me over and that's when I agreed to do it. So we read about the do's and don'ts and I set up the board. I light some candles, I turn on my camera so they can see what's going on, and I turn off the lights. It's pitch black in my room and I can already feel that what I'm doing is a mistake. Anyways, I start the seance. Mind you, I was very tired because it was early in the morning / late at night, and that's something that isn't really advised whenever using a Ouija board. I ask simple questions to begin with and nothing happens. Then comes the moment where I ask the name of the spirit. That's where stuff starts going south. The planchette starts to move so naturally I freak out, and so does everyone in the call. The planchette goes to P, then A, and ends with Z. It then stops and makes its way on the top right corner, then the top left corner, then the bottom left corner, and finally the bottom right corner. According to whatever we read prior to the session, whenever the planchette does that, it means that the spirit is evil and is actually trying to escape. That's where I decide to stop the seance, cause at this point I'm really freaked out, and so are my friends. I manage to end it, but right after that I'm frozen. I cannot move and I'm focused on this white orb glowy thing in front of me. I can feel that I'm bawling my eyes out, but I still cannot move, and my friends are yelling at me, asking if I'm okay without getting an answer from me. After a few minutes, the orb glowy thing disappears. I regain consciousness and let my friends know that I'm fine. We then talk about what happened, and someone tries to search for the name Paz. After a few minutes, the orb glowy thing disappears. I regain consciousness and let my friends know that I'm fine. We then talk about what happened, and someone tried to search for the Paz name. It turns out it's the name of a demon entity called Pazu. At least that's what we gathered from it. After that, I ended the call and tried to get some rest and recover from what just happened. The next day my friends tell me that her psychic medium friend came to visit her, and the first thing she mentioned was the seance we did the night before without my friend telling her anything about it. She said that it was indeed a good call to end the seance and that the spirit was trying to get out and was no good. Now we're in October of 2015, week of Halloween, where we played with the board. At this point I no longer speak to my friends because life happened. Anyways, throughout this whole week, I could feel something around me. Stuff would fall down without me touching it, and a lot of other stuff like that. I'm usually able to tell whenever a spirit or something paranormal is around me, but this time it didn't feel right or good. I kind of assumed it was connected to what happened the year before, so I decided to contact one of the girls who was with me that night, and she did tell me she felt the same way and stuff was happening too. Anyways, it's all over now, but it really was the scariest paranormal encounter I've ever had. I wouldn't advise anyone to mess around with a Ouija board. Now let me start by saying that, having spent my entire life living in New Mexico, a lot of people I know have claimed to see a skinwalker. They are kind of our regional boogeyman, but ask a Navajo about them and they will either absolutely ignore the question and all following, or they will kind of laugh it off saying something to the effect of, "Will white people believe they are myths?" Well, here's my story regarding them. My father owns a small delivery service that operates out of Farmington, New Mexico. We deliver small packages out to the middle of nowhere that are too much of a hassle for the large delivery companies to bother with. My dad is the only employee and we have a few pickup trucks and a trailer. One day we get a delivery out to Window Rock, Arizona on the Navajo reservation about 2 hours from Farmington. My dad gets the call for the job while he is chilling with his Navajo friend Mike and his girlfriend. Mike mentions how he's got family in Window Rock that he hasn't seen in ages and suggests that they go with him. I was about 6 or 7 at the time, and it was summertime, so Dad decides we'll all go down together. He can do his delivery really quick, then while Mike sees his family, we can go and check out the Window Rock, big rock face with a large hole in it that goes to the other side. Pretty cool. We had to convoy in separate trucks since my dad was loaded down with freight. We decided to bring along some walkie-talkies so we could communicate with one another. We spend our time in Window Rock. Everything is generally uneventful and we start heading home along the old highway with my dad and I in front and Mike and his girlfriend in their truck behind us. I honestly don't remember most of the Window Rock trip, but this next part I can never forget. We're somewhere on the highway between Window Rock and Gallup, New Mexico. It had just rained earlier in the day and the road was kind of slick, so we were taking it pretty slow. On the left side of the highway there is nothing but sandstone cliffs, and on the right there is a huge field separated from the road by a small barbed wire fence. We crest the top of this hill, and down at the bottom of the hill we see what appears to be a very large dog, sitting back on its haunches in the middle of the road, facing the cliffs. My dad calls over the radio, "Hey Mike, do you see that big ass dog?" Mike starts yelling back over the radio, "That is not a dog, speed up and hit it." He almost sounds hysterical. He just keeps screaming, "Hit it, George, you have to hit it. Please, please, hit that fucking thing right now." So my dad starts to speed up, and as we get a bit closer, I can begin to see it a little more clearly. It's covered in this brown, wiry, matted hair that appears to have dried blood all over it. It's still facing the cliffs, but the moment our headlights hit it, it turns and looks at us, and it has a face. I don't know how to describe it other than a mix between a bear and a human's face. It looks twisted and distorted and almost in pain. As we get closer to this thing, we start to realize it's actually fucking huge. Though it's still sitting on his haunches, it is about shoulder height with the hood of the truck. We get literally inches from hitting it when it lets out this scream that sounds like someone screaming as their lungs were being filled with water, and it leaps backwards towards the field, landing just on our side of the barbed wire fence. Then with another leap, it was gone from sight. Mike comes over the radio again. "Holy shit, keep driving. We have to get out of here. We have to go faster." He kept repeating that last part. "We have to get out of here and we have to go faster." Pretty soon we're speeding like crazy, and just as soon as we come near the outskirts of Gallup, we get pulled over. Mike pulls his truck over with us. Naturally, this makes the cop, a Navajo man himself, very on edge, and he immediately asks why Mike felt the need to pull over as well. Mike says, "We just saw a skinwalker a few miles back and it's been following us." The officer immediately turns white, stammers something about a verbal warning, gets in his car and takes off. We do the same. We didn't see anything else that night, but when we got home, Mike refused to let us leave without taking some kind of Navajo totem thing that was supposed to keep it away.